This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, February 4th, 2022, and my guest is the excellent Joshua Vergara. Hi, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing all right. What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for having me back. When we were planning this out, I remember you were saying something to the effect of, it's been like 2 years?
Yeah, roughly. I think the last time was 2020 sometime.
Okay. Was it during... I know. It's always the terminology. Was it during pandemic or was it before that?
It was like April or something. Like we were just kind of like, oh, this is no big deal kind of thing, you know.
Everyone was watching Tiger King and
that's right. And then I had you before that in 2019, I think. I was just looking, so that's why I know. Otherwise, I wouldn't know this. So, hey, we have a bunch of stuff. There's some leaks and rumors. Obviously, the Galaxy S22 is just around the corner. So that's going to probably be the big news item in the next couple of shows. But there's other stuff, and, you and I have been playing with a phone recently, and I don't know, what else is there?
I was actually looking at your Instagram stuff, and I noticed that you had a little bit of time on a big old tractor, so I kind of wanted to ask what was going on there.
Well, so John Deere released the first autonomous tractor at CES this year, right?
Yes, and that was really fun to look at.
Obviously, tractors have been automated to some extent for a while. I don't think people know this. I'm not a farmer, but John Deere's been at CES for a few years now because they do a lot of tech, and they've been kind of teaching us these things. So that's how I know the stuff. But basically, apparently for the last 20 years or so, a lot of farmers have just been able to sit in their cab and monitor their tractor following a GPS track that's preset of back and forth for tilling or whatever they're doing. And that's great. That just uses GPS and basically a computer control of the tractor. But this is one step beyond that. It's basically there's nobody in the cab. Now the tractor has cameras, has the ability to see and decide if there's an obstacle, whatever, right? Basically think autopilot like on the Tesla, right? But for your tractor. And here's the thing, right? It's much more complex to do this in a car because you have, you're going way faster. I think the top speed of this tractor is 10 miles an hour.
Oh, okay.
Right?
That makes more sense.
And then, what are you going to have on a field? You're going to have maybe an animal, a stray animal, a wild animal, or you're going to have you didn't know it, but there's a ditch there that wasn't supposed to be there, or maybe there is some junk, right? Some garbage that's just sitting there in the way of the path of the tractor. So the way this works is pretty cool, actually. You have an app, right? So John Deere's had an app for a while to control all this stuff, and it gathers data and helps you become a better farmer by giving you data-driven stuff, because data-driven is the way to go in everything these days, it seems. So basically, you bring the tractor to your field, wherever it is. In advance, you geofence. I mean, this has already been done because of, in the past, the GPS automation with the person in the cab. So you geofence the field, and then you can tell it based on the kind of crop and the sun orientation, which direction, which angle to do the back and forth in that space, right? And so that's all pre-programmed anyway. So you bring it to the entrance, and in the past, you used to sit in the cab and push a button and it would do its thing. And you'd be keeping an eye on it like autopilot today, where you're in the car keeping an eye. But this is autonomous. You don't have to be in there. So it's level 4 or 5 autonomy, like what Tesla calls full self-driving, which doesn't really work yet, right? But that's real, and it's on a tractor right now. So what they're doing is you have this slider, kind of like slide to unlock on your iPhone, but it's like slide to start, and then the thing beeps for 10 seconds, telling everybody around it, yo, I'm here, I'm doing my thing, I'm a 40-ton machine that's going to obliterate you if you get in my way, right? So it does that, and then it starts, and it does its thing, and it goes back and forth, and if it finds an obstacle, it stops dead in its track. I've never seen something stop that quickly, and it sends you on your phone a notification with a photo of whatever the obstacle is it found, and it lets you decide right there, should I go around it? Should I go over it because it's really nothing? Or are you coming to help me out somehow, right? So you get choices, and it's very interesting. So when I found out about this for CS, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I pinged my editor at TechRadar and I said, hey, we cover cars and vehicles with ADAS, advanced driver automation system, right? Like basically autopilot, all that kind of stuff. So why don't we cover this? Because it's not on the roads, but it's a much more controlled environment. So it's actually much more feasible. And it's kind of technology that's probably going to help us realize the thing in cars eventually, because it's being tested like every day in real life, right? So yeah, they were on board. So they said, can you arrange it? So I pinged John Deere and they said, hey, we don't have to fly you anywhere cold or far away. We have a test farm just south of Silicon Valley with all the equipment. So would I like to come and check it out? So I'm like, you're kidding me? I get to check out a tractor that drives itself. And get this, I got to drive it too. They taught me to drive the tractor.
Well, that's the thing, because Jaime, of course, my colleague over at Pocket Now, he was able to visit the headquarters out in Iowa. And I'm sure that's like somewhere in my future. But when I saw that you were there and you were checking it out in California, being California people, I was like, I kind of just want to stay in California if I can.
Yeah, you could drive up here. They probably could put you up. It's in Gilroy, I think, which is, I guess, like an hour south or half an hour south of San Jose. So it's still kind of Bay Area-ish, but it'll be closer to LA because it's in the south. It's in that direction. So, shave off an hour and a half of driving to get to San Francisco. And the nice thing is, you'd probably want to take 101 and get up that way. So you'd get the scenic route up to the Bay Area. But yeah, dude, it's amazing to see this thing in action. And it works very well. So it has 3 sets of cameras in the front, like front, left, front, right. And then 3 sets of cameras on the back, like back, left, back, right. And they're both, like, all of them are double cameras. They're like stereo, so they can see like a human. They can see depth. And that's basically all they do. That the tractor is not custom. This is a standard tractor that they've been selling for a few years that already has the GPS automation. So, it has the computer controls for the brakes and the steering and stuff like that, so that they just tuck the cameras on and a big computer to it. And it has 4G connectivity already. So that's not a problem. So it's a retrofit. So if you're a customer of John Deere right now, a farmer, and you want this, you have to have the right tractor, which is one of their fancier ones and bigger ones. But then once you have that, it's like, I think, a subscription base. They didn't tell me any pricing because, it's probably like a negotiate on a per, farm basis, because they probably have multiple tractors and stuff, the bigger farms. So anyway, yeah, the future is now. It was pretty unreal. I was in the cab while it was doing its automation. I was outside the cab. I flew a drone over it. Like, nice. I did a whole bunch of stuff. I'll have some content on my YouTube channel, I think, at some point as well, in addition to my story for TechRadar. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. Is that mobile? Yeah, I guess it is, right?
I mean, it's autonomy, mobile, like it kind of all blends together. The fact that you had to swipe to unlock the tractor is hilarious to me. So
also, it sends you notification if you have an Apple Watch or like an Android Wear Watch. Those John Deere app notifications pop up with visual. So you see like your Apple Watch. I have a photo of the Apple Watch showing like a garbage can in the middle of the field and the tractor stopped in front of it, right? And I'm just like this 40-ton machine is like talking to an Apple Watch that weighs 4 grams. I'm joking.
That's
it's probably
fantastic.
40 grams, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have a phone that I also have. Well, you had it. We both kind of have thoughts about. And so we're going to review the Xperia Pro-I because what a phone. But also, Sony, right? I liked your intro, by the way. This is probably the most Sony phone ever. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's, I follow a lot of like the Japanese companies because like I'm a big PlayStation fan and of course Sony. And I mean, my camera right now on the video call is a Panasonic. So like I tend to have sort of like a lot of thoughts as to how these Japanese companies operate. And Sony is a really interesting one because if you're a PlayStation fan, you know that Sony never budges. They pretty much never budge on their ecosystems. They never budge on their designs. They're going to go super left field, but you're just going to end up liking it over time. And I think that's what they're trying to do with the Xperias. Now, my main point I wanted to make in that video that I made was, this is a fantastic smartphone. It's a great smartphone.
I agree.
It's when you get to the cameras that you start to see how Sony just doesn't want to budge. They want to keep going with this whole full manual, like, let's give you all of the controls, because let's face it, Sony just threw their hands up and they were like, algorithmic processing, who knew it? Like, no, we're never gonna get it. I feel like that's what they keep saying whenever they release a new Xperia, and because one of the pitfalls with the work that we do is that we have the curse of comparison.
Yeah.
And of course, when the Pro-I came out, everyone was like, well, the Pixel 6 Pro just come out. It just doesn't give me that ease of use and the level of quality with the ease of use that we have on the Pixel 6 Pro. And I'm like, I get that. But of course, a company is going to choose their direction for every smartphone that they release. And the Pro-I is a direction we haven't seen in any smartphone until now.
100%. So, I reviewed the Xperia 1 Mark II before that. And then I'm currently also have the Xperia 5 Mark III, which is that trick telephoto with the periscope where it changes variable zoom on the periscope. But it's only two positions, 3x and 4.4x. And so in my experience with all these phones is that, I think I'm seeing some progress. Like, how you're saying, they're kind of entrenched in, and they are, but I think that the fact that they've now merged the full auto, consumer-based camera app, the basic mode that they call, into the Camera Pro app. It used to be two separate apps in the past. So there is some progress there. And I have to say that in full basic mode, it does automatically switch to macro and night mode, and it does a bit of an image stacking night mode. So there is some computational stuff happening there. I think overall, in basic mode, this phone feels like a phone from a year or two ago in terms of computational and results. Like every now and then it matches the Pixels and Galaxies and iPhones. And this is in basic mode, like in the, easy mode. And so I think they're kind of working on it and getting there. They're not completely ignoring computational, but it's not their strength. Yes. And it's only when, as you said in your video, you switch it to the kind of the alpha modes that are there and the alpha user experience with like that tactile haptic feedback on the dials and manual control. That stuff is really delightful. And on the Xperia Pro-I, you even get double like variable two-step aperture on the main lens, which is that 1-inch sensor. So I think that, it does deliver. Like that main lens, every time I saw your footage and I look at my photos that I took, it's a huge improvement over what's even on the Xperia 5 Mark III or my 1 Mark II that I had two years ago. So, it's definitely something to be said. The question is though, as you pointed out in your video, you have a ZV-1, right? The ZV-1, the blogger cam. And like, put that in your pocket and bring, an iPhone or, a Google or Galaxy with you, right? A Pixel or a Samsung phone with you, because then you're done. You get the best of both worlds because the ZV-1 is like an amazing camera for vlogging. But I'm not sure you'd want to use your main phone, especially once you start accessorizing with that rear monitor and that handle, that grip. At that point, just bring a ZV-1, right?
Well, did you get the full
vlogging kit? No, they didn't send me that kit.
Oh, that to me that really made the experience, if you ask me. Of course. Because it just made it so that a smartphone, we've always kind of wrestled with this idea that a smartphone could be a great vlogging machine, but it's missing certain features that we go to cameras like a ZV-1 for. Yeah. A flip out screen, mic inputs, all of that stuff. And this is one of those situations where Sony once again reared their ugly head and they were like, we have great ideas. Here's our great idea. Here's the problem though. You have to pay so much to get it and it's only available for this one phone. And it's like, that's such a Sony thing to do.
I know, totally is. Yeah, but I do like what they've done with this phone. I don't know if you see it in the video, folks. There it is. It's pretty cool. It has some really cool design. I love those kind of ridges on the sides, kind of like it reminds me a little bit of that ill-fated red Hydrogen One in some ways. Oh
man, yeah.
The only fault as a smartphone, this is a phenomenal. As you said in your review, it's a phenomenal phone. It's a mature flagship in every way. It's Snapdragon 888. It's last year's mature. I mean, it came out last year, so you can't blame it. It came out before the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 was announced, so it's fair. The only thing that I feel that they should have included that is it's on the 1 Mark III and all the ones, the Xperia 1 Mark II original Mark III is the wireless charging. They somehow remove it from the 5, which is I'm reviewing right now, and they removed it from the Pro-I. Now, on the original Pro, remember the one that was used as an HDMI monitor?
Yeah.
They removed it because they had a different case. Like it was, and they had the millimeter wave antennas and it was a thing. But in this one, it's glass back, and I don't understand why they had to remove it. And then more importantly, it has no millimeter wave, not that anybody cares. But it's interesting that it's a flagship that has US 5G support, unlike the Mark II. The Mark IIs did not have US band support for 5G. They had 5G, but no US band. So the Mark III and this Pro-I finally have 5G for the US, but no millimeter wave. So when you're spending $1,800, I'm okay to accommodate Sony's weirdness on the camera side because that's what you buy it for. But then give me the whole enchilada, right? Like I want my wireless charging, I want my millimeter wave, The rest of the phone is phenomenal. As you said, 4K display, 120 hertz, 21:9 display, so it's nice. There's no notches or cutouts of any kind.
It's actually got a pretty great audio experience as well. Those speakers are pretty good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Headphone jack, great stereo speakers. I mean, it supports every codec for Bluetooth you can possibly imagine, which is awesome. LDAC, which is missing on so many phones. I mean, look, it's really a Sony thing through and through, but then you have no wireless charging and it's $1,800. And I'm sorry, I know that's a minor detail to some people, but to me, it's not. I'm just like, how could you? You have it on the Xperia 1 Mark III, which is a $1,300 phone?
I think so, yeah.
Like, so why anyway? And then the other thing that I feel is as you said, it's like I love if basic mode could maybe not quite match, but come closer to a Pixel, an iPhone, or a Galaxy that's like in the last year, right? And they're still not there.
Can I ask you a question in that regard? Because I remember I got a couple of comments on my camera test because I did vlog with the phone while at CES. And again, the vlogging kit was amazing. But I made a point that because I'm so used to the way a smartphone captures content and whatnot, I felt like I was not forced, but it just felt like the right thing to do was to go into the Video Pro app and just like on Photo Pro, I would just hit that auto.
Yeah.
And where do you land on that? Because like, do you dive into the manual settings a lot? Are you actually dialing it in every single time? Because obviously we do that with our cameras, our actual cameras. But on a smartphone, it just doesn't feel like a natural fit.
You're 100% right. First of all, I want to let everyone know that I'm going to link to your two videos, the one for Pocket Now, the review, and the actual CS vlog from your channel on the show notes. So please, folks, give Josh some love and watch those and like them and all that stuff. You know how YouTube works. But secondly, for me, it's been a struggle. I'm reviewing this 5 Mark III and I reviewed the Pro-I, basically, we're doing this review right now, basically. And if I have to be honest, it's very rare that I go into manual control or even shutter priority or the program mode, because it's like, yes, the experience is solid, but I don't have time for that. Like it's a phone, right? I want to take a photo now. So then I'm in basic mode and then I'm getting a lesser experience with it than I get for, $800 less on a Galaxy, S21 Ultra that's currently probably on sale for $1,000. So
that's the crazy part, because when you think about it, there are phones that are $1,000 less than the Pro-I.
Exactly, that are just as good, like our Pixel 6, right?
Yeah.
So the point is like, I have to admit that I'm finding myself using the basic or the auto alpha modes more than the manual modes and the shutter priority and all the other settings. And there's also aperture priority on the Pro-I, since it has a dual aperture on the main lens. So, all that is great. And it's nice to have dual aperture on the main lens, because if you don't want that creamy bokeh because you're trying to capture a person in the front and there's stuff behind them, you can switch it. And it's really nice to have all that. Like, I'm on board, but I kind of question the why, because I'm just like, ultimately, I'd rather just take a ZV-1 with me alongside if I really need that stuff. And it's not really going to take that much space in my pocket. And so I don't know how to explain this phone to people. Like, conceptually, I want it and I understand what they're doing and I'm on board and I'm imagining myself going in and dialing all the settings and, being creative. But the reality is I pull it out of my pocket. I'm in a rush. I want to take that photo. I mash the button in basic mode. And then I'm disappointed because, maybe half the time I'm not getting a pixel level photo, So how do you resolve that?
I was going to ask you a question just like that about how you resolve that kind of thing. Do you think we're ever going to get to a point where Sony actually matches its competitors in the computational side, but still gives you all of that control? Because that could be a match made in heaven, and that might be a $3,000 phone, but who knows?
Well, I think that they're learning. I mean, I'm seeing some progress, as I said. It's better. Their computational stuff is better than it was before, and it's all now integrated in a single app, and I think they're doing it the right way. But I feel like, I also don't want to discourage Sony from making these crazy niche phones. Somebody needs to do it. Somebody needs to have the audacity and insanity to go like, I'm going to make an $1,800 phone. Watch this, bitches,
Yeah.
I kind of love it. But at the same time, I'm just like, oh, but why and how? Even I, as a camera enthusiast who has Sony cameras, feel like I'm not really in the mood half the time. Maybe it's because of fatigue and jaded and journalism, right? Maybe I just
maybe a little bit. Yeah.
I only have so much time to play with this phone and review it. So blah, but I don't think that's it. I think at the core, we've been so spoiled by computational photography, even those of us who are really into imaging, that when we hold a slab of glass and metal in our hands, we instantly just want to mash the button, right?
Yeah. And they did, if they were ever able to actually marry the two, they already have all of the things that people like us want on the phones, which is like hardware buttons, actual shutter.
So good.
Yeah. So I
love the industrial design on these phones. Like, I love the squarish look. I like the 21:9 aspect ratio, at least on the bigger phones, because on the 5 series, it's so narrow. It's iPhone 13 mini width. So it's like typing on a keyboard with my big fingers is a bit of a disaster. But that's just a me thing. Some people are going to love that. But I feel like that 6.5, the larger screen format that they have on the Pro-I and the Xperia 1 series is the right form factor. And god damn it, look at that thing. It's so hot. Like, it's metal and glass and so well built and put together. You're getting your $1,800 worth of hardware in this thing. It even has a notification light. Like, come on, I love it. Like it feels so retro, but yet so right. So, that's why I don't understand why they put wireless charging. They have everything but the kitchen sink in this, and then they just dropped the ball. Like, millimeter wave, I can kind of understand because only Verizon's really doing it, and nobody really cares.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just strange. And so then, I don't want them to stop. I don't want to give them a bad review. I don't want people to like not buy it, because then what happens if Sony decides to throw the towel, and give up like LG did, right? Like, I don't want that.
I think they'll stick around, if anything, because again, it's a very Sony thing to create a hardcore product that only certain users want. And if there's anything if there's one thing I know about like Japanese companies like this, is that they're always trying to create their products for home base. That's the first thing. Japan always makes...
And they have a pretty big market share still over there, right? In Japan.
They really do, yeah. Japanese companies make stuff for Japan. There's a reason why everyone talks about K-pop instead of J-pop. It's because J-pop is made for Japanese people. K-pop is made for everyone else. So that's the thing.
Good analogy. I love it.
So that's why I think about the Sony devices. They're still going to come out. They're still they finally ramped up their production to the point where we're actually getting releases every single year. That didn't used to be the case, but they are going to keep making them for their most hardcore fans, and I hope that continues, just like you said. I think it will, because they do still have that contingency.
Yeah, I'm on board. I just want it to be somewhat viable for them. So, if you're listening, Sony, keep up the good work. Make sure you add every feature like wireless charging, because at that price point, it's kind of hard to point at the phone and say, it doesn't have that. Like, you can't have any excuses, right? But at the same time, kind of start merging that computational basic mode with some manual stuff. Maybe you can have like some the alpha modes are just, raw, like hardcore, the old way, everything's done. You're still going to need some computational stuff, because even with OIS, which these phones have, to stabilize, you still need some electronic stabilization. You need to do the image stacking. You don't have large enough pixels and big enough glass. So, maybe have switches in there to turn that off on the alpha. So you can say, like, if you don't want any of that stuff, you can. We're going to turn off noise reduction for you. We're going to give you a raw image that you can process in Lightroom. All that needs to happen. But I would love to see kind of hybrid, where you get the basic mode, which is kind of close to a Pixel, iPhone, or Galaxy, flagship in terms of quality. And then when you go down to the actual alpha things, you have settings in there to say, I want multi-image stacking with a separate setting for, I want noise reductions, I want the sharpening. So you can actually decide which computational features you want. Like that, nobody gives you that level of control, right?
Yeah,
that would be the kind of the heavenly thing for me, in my opinion. But hey.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the Pro-I. I think we covered most of it, really.
Battery life could be a little better. I mean, 4,500 milliamp hour, I think it is. It's not the best.
I run into this problem all the time, and I'm running into it right now with phones that I'm reviewing at the moment, or just not really reviewing. I try not to use the word review as much anymore, but that I'm looking at, I can't really talk about battery life a whole lot because when I use a phone as my main, it's on Android Auto anyway, so it's constantly being topped up.
Right.
So I always have that problem, so I can't really say too much about the battery life. It did fine. Like, it worked the entire day at CES.
It's fine, but it's not, a lot of the phones today have 5,000 or more even, and you can literally use them for 2 days if you're not like hammering at them with games or something. And with this, it was just like, you do so much content creation, right? Video and photos that it does dwindle down pretty quickly. So, what I'm saying is that it's a large enough phone that I would expect a slightly larger battery maybe. But I mean, again, you're not buying that phone for that. Like you're not going to concern yourself with that, the pedestrian stuff when you buy an $1,800 Pro-I. Okay. But I get it. But I still think again, these are my only, like, honestly, the software is so stock. It's responsive. There's tons of RAM and storage. You have micro SD. You have everything. Headphone jack. Oh my God, so happy, right? And it's a good DAC and a good amp, and it supports, they have their bitrate upsampling stuff built in, which nobody else really does very well. And it sounds fantastic. You can basically upsample any content that comes in audio wise to, 96 kilohertz, 24-bit or whatever. And I know a lot of people think this is voodoo and it doesn't work, but as somebody who's worked in audio professionally for 3 decades in some way or another, I can tell you that with the right headphones and the right content, you can hear the difference. Upsampling is real. It works. It gives you a slightly better experience. So I'm happy they have that. And it's in hardware. You don't have to do anything. It's free.
It really did feel like there was just almost too much to talk about with the phone. That's why, especially for me, I try to keep my videos below the 15-minute mark. But if I really dove into every little thing that this phone was capable of, you're right. It is an $1,800 phone through and through when you compare it to its constituents, camera notwithstanding. Yeah, it could have been like a 30-minute video. And I almost wish that I still had the phone. I had to return it. I mean, that's just how it is with Sony. But I almost wish that I had the phone so I could do multiple videos on it. Not that I have the time for it, but I'm just saying, to really give it its due diligence, it takes a lot more than just a 10-minute video. And I could only cover so much in those 2 videos that I did.
100%. And I'm going to say that, it's kind of a hard sell, what I'm going to say, because as a second phone, maybe, if you have an iPhone, maybe this is the marriage made in heaven. You have an iPhone and a Sony Xperia, because the iPhone gives you, great apps, great battery life, millimeter wave 5G, wireless charging, and, this incredibly good computational camera experience. Now, it's not quite pixel good, in my opinion, but it's close enough, right? And then you get this Xperia that is a really solid Android phone, right? Has all the bells and whistles. And you're going to get this manual camera experience that's second to none, right? Yeah. So maybe that's the ticket. But then again, if you're that kind of person with that kind of budget, you probably have an Alpha 7 or a ZV-1 or a Panasonic or a, Fuji of some kind already, like some pocketable camera that you love. And even one potentially with interchangeable lenses. So at that point, hard to justify. I don't know. I don't want to not sell this phone. I want this review to be a positive review. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I had to give it if I had to write a review right now for Hot Hardware, I give this phone a 4 out of 5. It's worth it. You're going to be happy with this phone for 2 years that you have it, no problem. Yeah. But you're making some compromises and you're paying a lot of money. And so this is something you have to decide for yourself. And, the compromises are mostly in the mash away at the shutter button modes, right? Like the inability to really match the state of the art for computational stuff, as you said. And then little things like wireless charging. But you get so much more out of it. If you're really into watching video on your phone, this thing has a crazy bunch of video playback modes and color science for the screen and like crazy stuff like that. And then it has, great audio, as we said, and good for gaming. You gamed on it. I didn't, but was it solid for that?
It was
There you go.
solid, and there are boost modes, and of course, like do not disturb modes, which most phones, Android phones, have at this point. But it was a really good experience, especially considering the high refresh rate. The aspect ratio of the screen does make it. It does change things up a little bit, but not to an extent where your gaming actually changes. It's just something to keep in mind is that sometimes you'll get the
black
in this
bars.
case
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not letterboxing, it's pillar boxing or something like
That's
that.
what it is, yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it's called, but yeah, it was definitely a solid phone for all of that. And if anything, if anyone out there is on the fence about Sony phones in general, let's put it this way: these are the phones that, if you want to be a little bit like James Bond or Spider-Man, these are the phones you see in all those movies. So maybe you want to have it that way.
It's true. I mean, look, that's the other thing. Yeah, if you want something unique, like it's hard to get. Look. You could go buy an Oppo Find X3 Pro, right? I used it as my main phone for a while, but your band support's going to be really crappy in the US.
True.
Yes, you're going to be able to rock a phone and show it to people and they're going to be like, oh, wow, what a piece of beautiful jewelry this is. I'm impressed. Where did you get this? I love it. It's unique. Wow. So if you want that unique factor, but you want US support from a company that will give you customer service, we'll give you a 1-800 number to call, we'll give you band supports for the 5G in the US, boom, this is your phone. Like, this is one way to be very different and have a phone that almost nobody else has. So if that matters to you, that's another thing to look at, right?
Yeah, 100%. Still one of the most unique devices you can get, and if that matters to you, that you want to be different, this is about as different as you can get.
Yeah, and maybe you were a photographer for a while, you had all the gear, but it was through your job, and right now you're on a budget, and you have a lot, this is not a budget phone, but you have some money to spend, and you're like, I want a one device that does it all, and I want those alpha modes because I miss my alpha camera, and I can't afford an alpha camera anymore. Maybe that's it's very niche, and I think this is kind of why I love this Sony. I love the nicheness of it all. I love that they're not afraid to be like, yeah, of course you do that, Yeah. So more of that, Sony, but please give us the rest too. We want the kitchen sink as well, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So that's pretty much my review at this point.
So
do you want to switch to some news?
Yeah, let's do it. Looks like we have ourselves the Moto G Stylus on deck. Now, I haven't gotten a chance to take a look at this at all. But yeah, we have ourselves a 90 hertz display, Moto G Stylus with, of course, it's in the name, you have the stylus there, and a very large battery. I'm trying to see, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Moto does that a lot. They don't skimp on battery, which is nice.
Yeah. Around this price point, I do see that there are some other contenders, like as we're seeing here, was it $299, $300?
Yeah, it's $300.
Around this price point, didn't we just also get, it's only on Verizon, but the TCL30 V5G is also around the same price. It looks like in this price bracket, we're starting to see more contenders, and it's nice that Moto is making sure that they differentiate themselves, not just with a larger battery per se, but like a stylus. Like I will admit that there's nothing but like a Note that I use a stylus on most of the time. Like an S Pen is the main way that I have a stylus in my mobile devices, but I'm not going to discredit the fact that it's a useful feature to have in order to do some writing, maybe some precision tapping and whatnot. And for Moto to continue, I mean, this might be, we're how many years into having Moto G Stylus or stylus Motos for a while now?
It's like the third generation, this one. We got one early 2020. And then we got one in 21. We got two in 21. We got a 5G model later on in 21 as well. And then we got this 22. So yeah, it's three generation. My take on this is I played with the Moto G Power 2022 last year. At the end, they actually released the 22 model like in November or something. It was funny.
Yeah, look.
And this is their first kind of, that new design language you see in this Engadget article I linked to is that new camera pod design language. That G Power was the first with that. It was also the first in the G series with a 90 hertz display. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because this is kind of a step up from that. So this cranks the resolution up from 720 to 1080, but it's a similar processor, this Helio G88. I believe that's what it's using. And it has no 5G, and it has a 50 megapixel sensor. Again, very much like this G Power, but with a better resolution display and a stylus for like about $100 more. And so, I think that there's kind of a pattern here. We're seeing Moto they make these phones a little more affordable, those stylus phones, because the 5G stylus last year was really quite expensive, almost $500 or something for a phone with, like a Snapdragon 480, I think 5G. It's just a little bit weird. I mean, it's a good phone overall. I reviewed it for Geekspin, but I think the 4G version last year was also pricier than this. So I think that they're, delivering pretty decent package for the price. But then you have OnePlus. Remember, there's a phone from OnePlus that's almost a year old out there called the OnePlus N200 5G, which costs about $200. Now, it doesn't have a stylus, but remember, this is a capacitive stylus. So you could just get a capacitive pen and install like Evernote on there and be pretty much on par with this phone if you're willing to put a little stylus in a case next to your, OnePlus. And you're going to say, well, Miriam, come on. It's got 5G, yeah, but the OnePlus has like a 13 or 16 megapixel main camera. This is a 50. I've got news for you. After reviewing this G Power last year at the end of the year, the 2022 model, which also has that 50 megapixel sensor, this is the cheapest 50 megapixel sensor money can buy. And honestly, I hate to say this, but it's this Moto's image processing still just hasn't really evolved enough to be competitive. And I'd rather take the lowly little 13, 16, whatever it is, megapixel camera on the OnePlus with all of BBK's image processing might behind it than this 50 with Moto's relatively poor experience. So,
I mean, the megapixel numbers never really tell the whole story usually. So, I mean, a 50 megapixel camera might be great, but there's a lot of voodoo that has to happen in order for those pictures to actually come out pretty well.
And I don't think it's a bad sensor per se. It's probably a Omnivision or a really cheap Samsung sensor, but it's just not like you can tell it's first gen. Like they don't know how to process the data coming out of it. Like the previous Moto G's styluses with lesser cameras or 48 megapixel sensors did so much better. And I don't think it's the sensor. I think it's because it's the first time they're using. So I don't have this phone. So hopefully this is the second one. So maybe they've improved that. But the reality is this. Look, there's going to be a 5G version of this phone at some point, probably in the summer, with a different processor. Maybe, hopefully, we get that 695 5G, the Qualcomm chip, or we get a Dimensity of some kind, right?
That would be great.
That would be nice. But if it can be only $50 more 5G, I'd wait for that, because $350 for a 5G version of this would be cool. $300 for this, it's hard to justify when, the only key thing here is the stylus. Right?
Yeah, ultimately. And around this price point, you have to have like maybe just one or two specific things that might differentiate it, because everything else is going to be sort of at the same level. So I agree with you there. The Helio, by the way, I hope nobody really sleeps on that. MediaTek has been putting out some pretty great budget-friendly processors as of late. So, but couple that with a 90 hertz refresh rate, you can get some pretty good gaming done on this. I know my brain always goes to that portion of a phone, but I think you can get some pretty decent gaming done on this, especially with a high refresh rate screen. Kudos to them for putting that on there.
Absolutely. And the G Power, I had another Helio G series, I think maybe a slightly lesser one, and it was fine. It wasn't spectacular, but it was fine. And I've used many Helio higher end G chips from MediaTek, and they're fine. I just feel that their Dimensities are one step. Even the cheapest Dimensity, like the 700, seems a little more refined in terms of performance to me than any of the G Helio 4G chips. But let's see what happens with the 5G model. I think if you can get a really good deal on this, like if you're on a second phone or a phone for your kids or whatever, or you're on a budget and you really have a limit, I would not spend $300 on this. I would wait for a discount through a carrier or like a prepaid carrier, or even better, what always happens with Moto phones is they go down in price very rapidly after they're announced. So if you can get this for $250 or $200, 100% great phone. But because there are 200 phones that are 5G, like you said, the TCL, I said the OnePlus, do you really want to justify the stylus? Yes, it's stored in the phone. That is nice. But it's not like a stylus like on the Galaxy where it's active, Bluetooth and all that. You're not going to get any of that fanciness here.
Yeah, agreed. Well, you did say the big Galaxy word, so there is a little bit of news in that regard as well. We were also talking a lot about processor talk, so we're going to put the two together here. we don't know what's going to happen. Unpacked is only days away. Like, there's so much that is not answered yet that will be answered on the 9th. But we are in a new era of Snapdragon processors. And the speculation is whether or not we're going to be seeing the fabled Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. Man, that's a mouthful.
It is.
But this is the thing. Samsung is almost traditionally, I will say, but historically, Samsung has had the Snapdragon processors in some phones and their in-house Exynos processors in others.
Exactly.
I'm expecting that to be the same this year. But I guess the leaks right now that we're looking at here are just saying that certain regions will get the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and others are going to get Exynos. And to me, it's like cool. But I think my main question, like, because we know that was going to happen anyway for the most part, if history is anything to go by. But my quick question to this is, even outside the Samsung stuff, have you, Miriam, touched any phones with the new processor in it yet? I haven't yet.
I can't talk about it.
Oh, fair enough. Because
so
I was going to say,
draw your own conclusions.
There's always a mad dash to get it in the first phone of the year, usually from Chinese companies. But like, I haven't been able to really, I don't benchmark at all, but I haven't experienced it is what I'm trying to say.
So you were at Qualcomm. We actually sat down and did the benchmarks. Like there's a photo of us doing the benchmarks at Qualcomm.
Yes.
So we have an idea. And we've published our stories for that. You can see mine on Hot Hardware. But I think that for me, it's like, this is very much what I was expecting. Like I, figured Europe and a lot of parts of Asia, definitely the Middle East and stuff would get the Exynos, and then other parts of Asia like Japan, Korea, China would get the Qualcomm, and North America would get the Qualcomm as well. And it looks like South America is getting Qualcomm as well. So that kind of lines up to me with what I was expecting. So nothing new, but it's good to see a leak because for a while there's a lot of speculation that the S22 would be Qualcomm worldwide because the Exynos was released late, but seems to me that they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't go through all the effort of creating a flagship level chip that can compete with the best and then not launch one of their flagship phones with it, So sorry, Europe. I know you're probably frustrated that you're going to get an Exynos S22, but look, you never know. Maybe it'll be faster and better than the 8 Gen 1 from Qualcomm this time. Like, I know the radios are not going to be as high end because Qualcomm really hasn't that nailed, but you also don't have to deal with millimeter wave and all the weird bands we have to deal with. So, and as you know, China has every freaking 5G possible. So that's why they want the Qualcomm chips there too. And Korea, of course,
that does make sense.
Of course, they're going to do Qualcomm in Korea. That's their home turf, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you could argue that, of course, they want to do Exynos in Korea because it's their home turf. But I think they also have this variety of 5G that they need all this stuff. So I don't know. I think, look, let's see what happens. Let's see when we finally get benchmarks of these phones, we'll know. But benchmarks don't tell the story. I think that my biggest fear and my biggest concern, and I think why the Europeans are worried right now, is that the image processing on the Exynos Galaxies have always been a little lesser than the image processing quality coming out of the Qualcomm Galaxies. Has that been your experience too, Josh?
I can't remember. I can't remember the last time I had an Exynos variant.
I was going to say, you probably haven't. Neither have I. But empirically, from everybody that we know, like SAF and the folks in Europe that have access to these Exynos, their content seems to reflect that. So,
yeah, I can just see the exasperated thumbnails from SAF and TechChap right now of like, all of the Exynos versions.
I know, but look, folks, just don't panic, okay? Like, there'll be others. In fact, if you look at our topics right now, I'm gonna jump into this. Real quick, there is rumors of, and this is funny because I had Michael Fisher on the show not too long ago, and we were like, I think it was Michael. We were like, why don't they make an OnePlus 10 Ultra? And so there's been a bunch of rumors about that since then. And one of the rumors we have now is a patent drawing that outlines a phone that looks a lot like the OnePlus 10 Pro, but with a periscope rear lens and something that looks like it might be like a postage stamp style display like the Mi 11 Ultra had last year. And so that makes sense to me. You see, I think the Oppification of OnePlus means they're going to launch in China first now. I got that. And of course, before Chinese New Year, which is happening now, which is not Chinese New Year, it's really the Lunar New Year. It's the year of the tiger this year. Happy Lunar New Year, everyone. But the thing is, I think that we might actually get to see an Ultra as well, and it might come to the US. And because to me, the 10 Pro right now is so evolutionary, it feels like it should be an $800 phone that replaces the 9. And so we need something better. If you're going to make $1,000 phone OnePlus in the US, it better be able to play with the S22 Ultra, right?
Well, two things jump out at me about this. I mean, of course, these are like hand-drawn renders and whatnot, and suggesting that, yes, that little rectangle on the back there is a periscope camera, but next to it might be a screen. I'm not holding my breath. I think it's just going to be one of those, like, maybe that's where they write Hasselblad, who knows?
Right.
But two things stand out to me. One was that it could be a display on the back. And as much as I would enjoy that, I honestly don't think it'll be the case. But the fact that this particular phone, if it were to come out, OnePlus 10 Ultra could go Dimensity over Snapdragon. And I'm like, good for you, MediaTek. Like, I would love to see more of that, because the Dimensities on multiple phones last year were, I want to call it like last year's like pleasant surprises, because they did a great job for their price points.
For sure. But I see the Dimensity 9000 being more of like an India play, like a OnePlus 10R or even a OnePlus 10, if they ever make a OnePlus 10 for the carriers in the US. Although in the US, they'd probably want a Snapdragon. So, 10R in India, I see the 9000. Look, we don't know anything about, we never got to benchmark the 9000. Everybody told us at MediaTek it's going to compete, and I want to believe it. I would be on board with the OnePlus 10 Ultra with the Dimensity 9000, to be honest with you, if it can play with the big leagues, which they've assured us it can. But I'm just feel that, if you look at BBK Group's strategy, they've always put the Qualcomm chips in the highest end stuff.
Yeah, that's fair.
Always.
That's fair. Yeah,
and I don't see that changing. Even some of their upcoming phones are still putting Qualcomm in the mid-range in some phones. So it's like interesting, because I would go Dimensity for 5G all the way if I was making an affordable mid-ranger right now. Like it's a no-brainer. Why would you go for a Snapdragon 480 5G, which is meh, or the 695 5G, which is probably decent, but still not as good as like a 780 5G or something. So
yeah, definitely. You since you brought up the OnePlus side of things, I'm guessing you and Michael or whoever it might have been at the time, but I wanted to ask you, first of all, shout out to any of the creators who actually imported the 10 Pro. That's a level of commitment I don't have right now.
Yeah. I mean, some of them some Marquez got his Sudi brand, which is a great partnership to have.
That's nice.
But I think others, definitely paid for it, it looks like.
So how do you feel about, you said it in a phrase earlier, the oppification of OnePlus? Like, I didn't want to call it the demise of OnePlus, because it's not, but like, how do you feel about this shift that the company has made?
Oh my God. This has been the topic of the podcast for the last every show, I think. Everybody I've had on.
Okay. I apologize.
Don't worry about it. No, I'm happy to discuss it again. I just feel like just a rant. Like I'm just like, it's a very murky strategy. Like if it was I'm not upset that it's changing. Change is inevitable, and it's been very clear for a while now that OnePlus is more interested in being a mainstream brand.
Yeah.
But there's no clear strategy yet. And I had a conversation with Ryan over at OnePlus Oppo, right? And he basically say stay put. So I kind of want to believe that there is a strategy. It's just a little crazy right now because things are getting realigned. And I think supply chain challenges are not making this easier either. So I think let's be patient. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. If I were running the show, what I would do is make OnePlus the Western brand. Yeah. Like North America and Europe. I would still sell Oppo in Europe because there's brand equity there. But I would say for North America, I would try to, like that Oppo Find N, which I have in my pocket and I absolutely love, I would make a OnePlus version of that for the US only. Go crazy. Or maybe sell it in China too so you can justify it because, you probably have a marketplace for that there. But make that for the US and we definitely bring us a OnePlus 10 Ultra. That's, $1,000 and undercuts and overperforms, the S22 Ultra, because the S22 Ultra, because of carrier deals, BOGOs and everything is going to be discounted down to $1,000 very quickly. and possibly less with trades. I bought a Z Flip 3 not too long ago for $180 by trading in a couple of phones.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, like, how did you find that deal?
No, I traded in a couple of phones. But my point, the fact that I was able to get it for 10% of its price, or, not quite, but 20% of its price is incredible. So the point is, I think they're never going to reach that with OnePlus in the US. They don't quite have that might yet of the BOGO and the carrier support and the trade-in facilities to do that. So if they can in some way make a better phone, in some ways, not all the ways, than the S22 Ultra and sell it for $1,000 up front, then we're going to be impressed, right? Especially with Hasselblad and all that. And it's a second gen. So hopefully now this Hasselblad tuning is better and improved. The 10 Pro reviews so far, don't show that it's much more than an evolution, but let's see how it goes. And simultaneously, what I really want to do, if I were in charge, I would bring the Nord 3 or whatever it's going to be called to the US as a carrier phone with the MediaTek Dimensity 9000 or Dimensity even 1200 or whatever the current mid-tier top 1000 chip is. Because the Nord 2 last year was brilliant and we didn't get it here. And this is the perfect carrier phone. It can be a Pixel 6 competitor, basically $500, all the trimmings, OIS on a IMX 766. It was brilliant. Like, honestly, here's the thing. I have one. It took better photos than the OnePlus 9, which didn't have OIS.
Really?
Of course, because it had OIS and it's the same sensor. The IMX, the one that was in the ultra wide last year. So it's the same sensor as the Oppo Find X3 Pro on a $500 phone with OIS.
That is a big deal. Math. And those sensors on the X3 Pro are still chef's kiss.
And BBK knows how to tune them.
Yeah.
Oppo has and even OnePlus has done a very good job with that. So I think we don't need a 10. I don't want to see a 10. I want to see a super competitive, kind of like pleasing the old school OnePlus crowd, pseudo flagship, upper mid-range, whatever you want to call it, premium mid-ranger, budget flag, whatever. That's like in carrier store from T-Mobile especially for $500 and gives you something that nobody can touch other than maybe buying a Pixel 6, And then I would go all out for the rest of it. Just 10 Ultra, all the trimmings, poke at the big bear that is Samsung. But I'm not sure if they're willing to do that. And I'm a little worried that we're not going to get that.
Yeah, I can see that, and I agree with all of the points that, especially since OnePlus does have a foothold here in the West, they really have to go all in on that if they want to, number one, keep it, but number two, it's just a matter of historically what OnePlus has meant to the users across the world. It's different now, and that's why everyone's talking about it. That's why I was curious what your thoughts were, because I'm seeing other people with the 10 Pro, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't know if I'm going to like it when I get it. Like, if I ever do, that is.
Yeah, right now, I'm not too excited. I kind of want to like it and be excited, but I'm just like, the cat's out of the bag, and we're going to get a version of that with Oxygen OS. Good, but is there anything really redeeming there?
Yeah.
Really, the pricing will make it. Like, if this thing is more than $800, I'll be able to say that OnePlus has lost the plot and that strategy is broken. And maybe they'll rectify next year. But I think they broke it last year. There are things were not great last year. The 9 Pro was not the most exciting phone, and the 9, because it cut corners like no OIS, was literally catering to the carriers and I think was a disaster. And so they already know that. So I hope they rectify this year. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're coming up on the wire here. I don't know.
You know what? There's a couple of more things. Since we're talking about BBK, maybe we can talk quickly about a folding clamshell rumor. So,
let's do it. Yeah.
How they have the Oppo Find N, which is kind of like a small form factor Z Fold, I guess, you could say that. I actually love that form factor. And then,
same.
Obviously Oppo is going all out this year with all kinds of launches from what I hear. So I think this is possible. A Z Flip competitor from Oppo that's maybe more affordable. I can see that, and I'm on board. That's basically all I have to say about this piece of. But I wanted to share with the audience because I'm like, we got to keep an eye on this. This could be good.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. And the clamshell foldable is starting to gain steam. Not to say that it's on the same level of competitor with Samsung and Oppo, given everything that's happened, but the Huawei, what was it? The
P50 Pocket. Yeah.
The P50 Pocket, yeah. Shouts out to anyone who was able to get that phone out in Asia. That does look pretty cool.
Yeah, I pinged Huawei for one, and I haven't heard back yet. I think they're very low on devices is what they were saying. So I might get one at some point, but stay tuned. Then, the other thing I want to point out is that we've kind of touched it last week a little bit. There's some Pixel 6a leaks that are kind of building up even more.
This one's funny though.
Yeah, this is, so please tell us.
Okay, so apparently the Pixel 6a was sort of mentioned in a piece of swag that was given to the Pixel Superfans group. It was a coloring book sent out alongside a Nest Audio smart speaker. And by the way, Pixel Superfans, shouts out to any of you that might be listening. I hosted the Pixel Superfans event when the Pixel 6 Pro came out. So
nice.
Shouts out to everyone there. But yeah, it was like limited edition swag, and inside of it, there was a table of contents that actually, like, there were a lot of things, and it looks like pretty much everything in the book. It was a coloring book after all. It was all like handwritten. It was all very custom. But apparently in the table of contents, there was something that said Pixel 6a. And Google themselves have never even mentioned that an A version of the 6 is going to come out yet. And obviously we're still in the middle, like early on in the cycle of the Pixel 6 lineup. So it's like, this is the first tiny little inkling. And I guess in my head, I keep thinking to myself, the lines have been blurred over the last couple of years as to whether or not Google actually does this stuff on purpose or is on accident. And I love that we can't tell. And that's what this is right now, is that for a company that could curate literally everything that they release to fans and customers, this somehow slips through the cracks. I don't know if I believe that.
No, I think this is intentional. And I think we've seen it started with the Pixel 4, right? All these rumors, and they dropped that tweet with like that kind of like dark, that showed the camera pot. Since then, I think the Google marketing team is on effing point, dude. They're doing this. They know what they're doing. Look, every time there's leaks about a Pixel, we get what we see, right? Like, it's absolutely accurate. So we've seen leaks of the Pixel 6a design already, and we know what it's going to look like. It's going to be a junior Pixel 6 cosmetically, but it's going to have the Tensor chip and last year's, legacy camera sensors, which I think is very smart because they're so well tuned. I think it was one of my recent guests, we were talking about that, and I was like, I think the 5A right now takes probably better tuned photos than the 6 and 6 Pro with the main sensor, because they're still trying to eke all the possibilities out of this massive, 50 megapixel Samsung sensor they have, and the pixel binning and all the complications that it brings. And I respect that. It's going to take a few generations for them to master this. And it's okay, because when they do, it'll be better than a 5A ever was. But now, you put them, sometimes I feel like the 5A takes better photos. And so maybe the 6A is kind of like going to be surprising us by being affordable and take almost slightly better photos than the 6A, because it's going to benefit from the Tensor too. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. So I'm excited about this 6A because, man, the A phones have just made me smile and happy.
Yeah.
So much in the last few years. It's such a breath of fresh air.
When those phones come out, I'm constantly telling people who ask me, like, what should I get? I don't have a whole lot of money to spend. It's the easiest recommendation to make every single year.
100%. And last year, I reviewed it for Hot Hardware, and I was just like, I got it in my hand. I was like, oh man, this is like a 4A, revisited. And then I started using it, Josh, and I was just like smitten. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. This is even better than the 4A because it's water resistant now. And it's a little narrower, such little refinements. I think when you iterate, and this is, I think, why people love the iPhone so much. I mean, there's a lot of lock-in, but if you look at it in the absolute, there's a lot to be said about just iterating, just slightly changing things year after year. Even Samsung's doing it in many ways. If you think the S22 Ultra is going to be that much different than last year's S21 Ultra, you're mistaken. It's a newer chip. You get a stylus. Like I'm speculating. I have no idea, right? But from all the leaks and rumors we've had, like you're gonna get a stylus. You're gonna get a newer processor. But they're gonna stick with the same formula because guess what? It works. And if you can iterate and tune and fine tune, it's a better experience. And I think no other phone than the Pixel 5a ever made me feel that way. Totally boring phone that totally blew my mind when I started using it.
The whole just iterating and just sort of refining it tiny bit by tiny bit. That sounds familiar. To bring it back full circle, that's a Sony thing.
Totally is. So hey, we have like a few more minutes before we have to do the credits and stuff. Do you want to like jump in quickly on maybe some of these iPhone rumors? Because I've been putting them off. Like I've been putting off discussing these rumors for 2 or 3 weeks now, and I think that they're getting more and more important because every time we're getting more confirmation of them. So the two rumors are an iPhone 14 Pro will have a punch hole instead of a notch, like an oblong oval, like we've seen on the Nord 1, the original, or like on the many Huawei phones, right, in the past, like the P40 series. And remember even the Galaxy, was it the Galaxy S10 series had that oblong hole on some of the models? Okay.
Yep, it did.
And then
the pill.
The other rumor is, of course, an iPhone SE 5G. But what struck me about those rumors is that it's just adding 5G with a new processor to the existing SE chassis and camera system, or maybe improving the cameras a little bit, but not adding a second one, which I'm like, what are you doing? So what's your take? I mean, that's what I'm hearing, but who knows? Maybe they'll give us a new chassis. But, I think they're trying to leverage that iPhone 8 chassis for another generation, I guess.
And I don't see why not. Like,
right.
I when it comes to the SE, bring it on. I love to see different variations of the iPhone. Earlier, you were saying how, like, because I know that I come from an Android background, but I will admit that after going solo, like, I carry 2 phones at all times, and one of them is usually an iPhone.
Of course.
But there are very specific reasons for it, is because I wear a glucose monitor, and the iOS just integrates with Dexcom way better than Android does, so I have to keep it on. But that being said, the SE, again, like we just said how the 5A, the 4A, whatever the case may be, were super easy phones to recommend. The same goes for the SE. And if it's somebody that's in the Apple ecosystem or is in a family that has Apple products, you can just like introduce someone into the Apple ecosystem via an SE. I don't really like that this article is... Well, it's not the article's fault. It's not the writer's fault. I'm just saying that the speculation is it's going to be called the iPhone SE Plus. Let's be real here. It's going to be called the iPhone SE 2022 because that's what the last SE was called. I would look forward to it a whole lot. And I think that an SE, I just want to, as a tech reviewer, if you're not able to get one from Apple, it's the easiest phone to get and then do content on because it's the cheapest one.
Because it's so affordable. 100%. Like, I feel like I want this to be a slight variation on what we have. Like, keep it the same size, maybe give it an OLED instead of an LCD, and then give it a second ultra wide camera. It doesn't have to be the super fanciest one. And please give us the proper night mode that the SE deserves, because the current SE doesn't have the night mode functionality you see on even the iPhone 11, I think. So we need to go.
I think they have to put like some real thought into the cameras, because if after all the hubbub that the iPhones made in their last release cycle,
oh my God, yeah.
You have to put some of those things in the SE or else everyone's going to be pissed off. Like, imagine an SE coming out that didn't have cinematic mode. Like, people, even though no one uses cinematic mode, people are going to be like, come on, you're not going to try to put in the SE? Like, people will complain.
Yeah.
That being said, for the mainline devices, okay, this notch is something that we're so used to. I'm looking at one right now on my Mac. Like, this is something that we're used to at this point. I have really no opinion on whether or not it should go to a pill and a dot. I actually think it looks kind of nice.
You know what? I kind of like this pill and dot thing because it reminds me, remember when the iPhones had white bezels? Which I really loved. I'm kind of bummed actually that the current SE is only available with a black bezel, even if you buy the white model. And you lose that kind of like, I know they're trying to make it look modern and stuff by doing that so you can't see the bezels, but the reality is, I love the white bezel on the older iPhones. And it had that, remember it had that slit for the speaker and that dot for the actual camera. And I think that if you could replicate that in a screen today, like I think it would still brand as an iPhone, because people could relate to remember how a long time before the notch, before the iPhone 10, we had, the pseudo generic iPhone bezel thing that would put around apps when they would do PR materials, right? And it always was the white bezel one with the clearly, in that pattern is a iPhone pattern. And I think they could kind of wean themselves out of this notch that they've been kind of fell into and are kind of stuck in now by doing something that kind of reminds people of these old bezels on these old iPhones and still make it fresh and give us our Face ID and give us an even more futuristic looking phone.
Would it fit in the pill and dot? Because like we've been told for years that the reason why this is so big is because it needs to be able to fit all the Face ID tech.
But maybe they've miniaturized it. This is Apple with billions of dollars, and I'm sure they're working hard on it. And if you're listening, Apple, I know you're not, but if you are, please give us a in-power button fingerprint sensor in addition to Face ID on that new iPhone, because it's such a delight on the iPad Air. And with the pandemic, even though I know there's a software update coming out that lets you use your iPhone Face ID with a mask, I still think I would want a bit more security. And I know, like for my spouse who uses an iPhone SE, part of the reason they don't want to switch to the notch and Face ID is because they just love having the Touch ID stuff.
The actual home button, yeah.
So giving them a choice, if they want to go, they're going to eventually have to go to a new iPhone that doesn't have a bezel and a front home button. And when they do that, it would be nice for them to have another option. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who are still very put off by, this Face ID and this notch thing.
Fair enough. But at least it's going to look a little more minimal. So for gamers and content consumption people like myself, we're not going to have this whole like section cutting into our content anymore. So I'm all for that.
Me too. I think these rumors are interesting and probably pretty accurate. But again, I know I'm probably not going to get that because economies of scale and supply issues. We're probably going to get essentially an iPhone 8 chassis with a 5G chip. And I think part of that is because the 5G is getting very necessary with AT&T dropping 3G now. If you have an iPhone SE on AT&T, you're like pretty much having to use LTE for everything. And that's limiting you a little bit, I think. So with 5G rolling out nationwide now, I think you definitely want a phone that has 5G bands of some kind. So, and then, get the latest processor and you're set for 4 or 5 years of iPhone updates. So, it's not a bad deal. All right, Josh, you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, all the different things you do? You do so much stuff.
I do, and it's starting to. I'm not even able to keep up with it myself half the time anymore. But in any case, we did have some articles here. If you look in the show notes over at Pocket Now, where I actually do some videos on Pocket Now's YouTube channel at youtube.com/PocketNow. However, for the rest of pretty much everything else, you can find me across the interwebs. Just look up my name, Joshua Vergara. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. I'm doing my best on there. My handle on all three networks is JVTechT. I love tech and I love to drink me some tea. Over on YouTube, my main content is just under my full name, Joshua Vergara.
Yes, folks, please subscribe to all the channels and follow Josh because it's great content. I love your videos. They're just nice.
Oh, thank you.
And if you want to hit us up on Twitter to discuss this podcast, you know what Josh's handle is. And mine, of course, is Tankgirl at TNKGRL. Like the comic book character, just drop the vowels. You know the drill by now. So yeah, hit us up on Twitter with your thoughts about this podcast, questions, comments, whatever. And then look at my handle on Instagram, also at TNKGRL, for some photos of phones, photos taken with phones, photos of cars, since I do a lot of EV type reviews for Tech Radar. And then you know where the podcast lives. It lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. There's an RSS feed there if you're old school, but we're on all the platforms. So Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. So please subscribe. Tell your friends. And if your app lets you review or rate the show, please do. That also helps. There's a couple of YouTube channels you can subscribe to that are related to the podcast with visuals. So if you're not subscribed to our Patreon, which I'm going to talk about in a second, to watch the video version of the show, check out the YouTube. You're going to see the unboxings of a lot of the phones that we're discussing right now. YouTube.com/MobileTechPodcast is one of them, and YouTube.com/MobileTechMore is the other. The first channel is mostly the phone and audio stuff, and then the other channel is everything else. So like travel tech, home automation, car tech, fun stuff. And we're still developing that second channel. So please, you know how YouTube works. Like the videos, subscribe to all the channels, and comment and click the little notification icons, all that good stuff. Love to see you on YouTube. And remember, you can comment on YouTube about the podcast. I'll field those comments, no problem. Then I also wanted to point out that you can watch this podcast as a video right now on Patreon, and I get it to you a day or two before the audio version. There's a tier for that. There's also a tier for for a Discord server. There's a tier for a bunch of other stuff. If you want some more exclusive content, like I actually released an extra 10 minutes that I recorded with Jaime Rivera. We couldn't fit it in the main podcast, so that was a nice little supplement. Consider joining Patreon to get all these perks. Patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I do want to thank the patrons. Thanks so much for being awesome and being on board. It really helps. It helps me support the show. You know, it's really hard to monetize podcasts, so any little bit of help is appreciated. And then we have another option if you don't want to use Patreon. I have a PayPal link in the show notes, so you can buy me a coffee with a PayPal donation. That would be awesome. And then finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. They've been with us since the early days. They're fantastic. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL for the special deal. That's a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book if you leave at the end, but I think you won't leave because it's Audible. It's the platform for audiobooks. If you're a bookworm like me and you love to read, but you don't want to read because maybe your eyes are tired. I'm from my computer all day, so it's tiring. Or you're on an airplane, it's too dark. I don't have really good eyes, so it's hard for me to read paper anymore unless it's bright enough. So you know what? I love Audible because they read it to me. It's great. And they have a ton of books to choose from. They have a lot of books read by the author. They also have shorter content, podcasts, a bunch of stuff. So look, I think you should try it out. It costs you nothing to try it out for 30 days. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL. Check it out, and it'll help the show, and it'll help Audible. Everybody will be happy. So yeah, thanks to Audible for being our longtime sponsor, and thanks to you, Josh, for being my guest yet again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to be on.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely have you on at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.